Sometimes to truly make a change, you have to do something big, something dramatic, and something that ensures that you never go back to the emotional and physical traps that have made you so unhappy. One of the best days of my life was the day I smashed my scale. I loved it so much, I think we should all do it. And to make rejecting diet culture even more exciting, I'm giving away free advice and prizes, including a full year of body kindness coaching with me. So to join, visit bodykindnessbook.com/BK Scale Smash. That's bodykindnessbook.com/BK Scale Smash. There you give your name and email and you'll get the motivational coaching from me. Lots of ideas for how you can participate right there on the page. And I look forward to joining you all summer long while we work together to just tell the world that we don't need scales, we don't need judgment, we don't need criticism. What we need is body kindness. Because real health is about being good to yourself. It's time for Body Kindness, the place where all bodies fit and weight is just a number. Hi, I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, author of the book Body Kindness, registered dietitian, nutritionist, certified exercise physiologist, and host of this podcast. My topic today is intuitive eating for families, and I'm so excited to have Elyse Resch, the co-author of Intuitive Eating and the Intuitive Eating Workbook, here with me today to have this conversation. If you've read Body Kindness, you know that I am a huge supporter of intuitive eating. It helped me personally get away from a dark space, and it's the way of eating that I recommend and use and promote with my clients. And it's really fascinating to me to know that intuitive eating was first developed in the 90s, and it is still going strong, and we need to kind of get it even stronger. This particular focus is really important because we often want to also help other people, whether it's our own children. And we heard about this on the previous podcast with Leslie Schilling about Born to Eat, which also embraces intuitive eating. Or it could even be just kids that we have a connection to and inspire and mentor. And this is really an approach that we're born with that can work for everyone. And I'm really excited to have Elyse on the podcast and share her perspectives of intuitive eating and with some specific focus areas on how this works for families. So you're in for a real treat. And overall, you might have noticed that this summer I have tackled some topics that connect with families. So earlier in July, we heard from Aaron Flores, a male dietitian, about men hiding their body image issues. And then we also heard from Katie Parker for Strong is the New Pretty. And now we have this intuitive eating for families. So I'm hoping that with these summer conversations, with the kids being off from school and, just, I guess, maybe family a little bit more on the brain, that this would be a helpful topic. But even if you don't have kids, everything in here is going to be relevant to you on your intuitive eating and body kindness journey. And we all know a child, and we all can make a difference in a child's life. And even if you don't feel like you should intervene, even just simple modeling, and we'll talk about that in the show today, there is a benefit to simple modeling. So you're going to hear all kinds of conversation about teenagers and rebellion and stories about what doesn't work from both of us. And also getting clarification that intuitive eating is not a diet. And that is something that even if you're day one on intuitive eating and you read or hear anyone talk about lose weight with intuitive eating, you could just very confidently say, actually, that's not true. Its focus is on pleasure and satisfaction and connection and attunement to your body. And I also appreciate our conversations about medical practitioners and how she advises that we set boundaries with the doctor. So be sure to read the show notes to get our links and to read more about Elyse Resch. She has so many accomplishments and letters after her name, and she has a presence on social media too. On Twitter, she's at Elyse Resch, and she's on Instagram and Facebook. So be sure to check her out. And thank you for listening to the show. Elyse, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Rebecca.
I just cannot wait to dive into this conversation because A, I have kids, and B, I could not love intuitive eating anymore. Number one fan. It really saved me from a horrible life of dieting and body hatred. And it was like this little light that said, there is something better if you will commit to learning it. And it is a journey. You know, I was saying before we got on that I'm reading it again for the third time, and that you always pick up something new and different. But you know, my role in my life has changed in being a mom of two young girls. It's not just about me. It's about these young and innocent children, and how do I raise them to become, hopefully in the long term, good adults, but help them in their life and being good kids and really focusing on their well-being. And certainly I have this desire to protect them in any way, even though I know I can't completely shield them, but protect them from dieting and diet culture. So I'm really going to pick your brain today about what we can do. So, but let's just start. I'd love for you to fill me in and the listeners in on just what you've been working on lately, what's been coming up in your life.
Okay, well, we just released the intuitive eating workbook, which took, I was telling you before, 22 months from beginning to end. I think I don't tweet very often, but I said something like it takes the gestational life of an elephant to 22 weeks for that, and months, not weeks, 22 months for either of them to arrive. So that just came out 2 months ago, and now I am writing an intuitive eating workbook for teenagers, which I'm so excited about. The writing is completely different. I'm speaking to them in their language. I'm talking a lot about social media and the effect of it on them. And it's just fun because it's very down to earth. It's not talking to an adult about studies that show this or that. Kids don't care about that.
Yeah.
That'll be, of course, who knows, end of next year, maybe that'll be out. So very exciting.
Well, you know, I got to be honest, we need it now. I mean, often on my professional listservs, you know, people ask, you know, is there a good book for teens, or what's a good, you know, I hear people asking for good body image books for teens, which, you know, I mean, when people are struggling with body image, you know, their food is bound to have an interconnection there, right? Because we're being told that our bodies aren't good. And so therefore we need to diet, or we need to do something to try to change our bodies. And certainly I think that we're really lacking a good book that helps teens, meets them where they are, and you're right, who understands them, who's not going to judge, but can also introduce what we know as science-based and shown to be helpful and to be healthy for a person's well-being, but without kind of making it so difficult for them to unpack and figure out. So I can't wait fast enough for that. Hurry up and get it done.
Right. And it's so amazing to me how much work does need to be done in this area. I have the great privilege of working with clients who had come to me years ago and healed their own eating problems, who have raised children, and their kids are now almost teenagers, and they have no problems with eating. They're completely connected with their hunger and fullness. They're talking to their parents about, oh yeah, everything's in balance, and I have enough of this, and I probably had too much play food today. I think I don't feel like any more. But it's coming from a place of trust with, inside of them. And so these families have raised their children in such a trustful way. And there's so many others that don't. I was working with an 11-year-old child yesterday, and it's just so fascinating to me. I spoke to the mother today, and there's 3 children in the family. 2 of them are tiny little children, and this little girl is a little bit larger, and she treats her differently than she treats the other kids. And the little girl was saying to me yesterday, yeah, they get to have their brownies, but I don't. And there's so much education I'm going to have to do with these parents.
Yeah, I've gotten that a lot too in my practice, where they'll say, I want help. I want you to help me with both of my kids. And they bring it immediately to size. One needs more food. One doesn't need as much.
Yes.
And I just, it's like just want to hold your breath and get them in the office.
Right. And I was saying to this mom today, your child is really smart. And just by saying to her, well, you don't need to have that, you're telling her she's not acceptable as she is. There's a message in that, and you're not treating her equally to your other children. So, and the little girl said to me, if my mom would just get off my back, she's causing me so much stress with my eating. I think I eat more because I'm stressed out. 11 years old,
Yeah.
just preteen.
And to be that young and yet so aware, right, of the connection for what she thinks may be driving her interest in eating. I mean, that's remarkable,
It was wonderful. It was an opening. It was just amazing for her to really understand that. And she's not quite old enough to understand the rebellion part of it, the fact that she's reacting and she's doing this in reaction, probably, some of the extra eating. So how wonderful to get her at 11 and to get her parents at that age and help change that.
Yeah. Oh, it's such important work. Let's I definitely want to get more into the family intuitive eating issues, but I do want to make sure, just for the benefit of every listener, because I know I've seen intuitive eating co-opted by diet culture, right? Like lose weight with intuitive eating. And I know that just makes you mad. So let's get clear on what intuitive eating is and what it is not.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm pretty much upset every other day with something that comes up that's not actually accurate. So to me, most people are, and I say most because there are some babies that have problems when they're born, but the majority of people are born with all the information they need to have to know how to eat. Babies know when they're hungry, they cry. When they're full, they turn their heads. Little toddlers, when they're given solid foods with no judgment, are given a full array of foods, and there's no, you better eat your chicken before you get your cookie. They grow up with this intact knowledge about when they're hungry, when they're full, what foods they really enjoy, how their bodies feel when they eat in a certain way. So intuitive eating is about reconnecting people with that internal wisdom because we're so pulled away from it by this whole obesity epidemic. And I must say, when you introduced me, that's when it said I was an obesity expert, that's from 35 years ago. That actually, it needs to be, I think I've taken it out of my bio since, because I think that this whole focus on obesity is really very harmful and not helping people feel good enough about themselves and good enough about trusting their own wisdom. So in any case.
No, I mean, actually, that's a good point. That's a really good point to acknowledge, because I think the whole idea that everybody is learning and growing, and that many years ago, I mean, that was in the language, right? And then you learn about weight stigma and words that are stigmatizing and the medicalization and how the whole medical model can like pathologize bodies and how that's more harmful. And then it's like all of a sudden, we evolve and we're like, there are certain words that make us cringe that before it was like, that was just what you did before you knew that there was harm. And so I think that's, I think it's always important for people to understand that we are helping professionals, but we are also human, right? And as we learn and grow and learn more, we change what we do so that we're back to being helpful, right? But there was a time when people just use those words.
Well, and in the original edition of Intuitive Eating came out in 1995, and that was well before we were enlightened. And I think on the original book, it said, find your natural weight. And even if any focus on weight has been pulled out of Intuitive Eating, in the third edition, which came out in 2012, every word, every number was pulled out of that book. And we just, if it had to be mentioned, that we talked about normalization, but not a focus on weight, because it really distracts people, sabotages people from learning about their internal signals. And it also puts that focus on you can change your weight. And that's not really true. I mean, we know that diets don't work, and we know that everyone has a blueprint, set point, a weight that person's meant to be. Some people live in larger bodies, some people live in smaller bodies. And helping people understand that there's nothing wrong with them and they can be perfectly healthy regardless of size or shape. So yes, the health at every size. Besides, I was missing this. Of course, I know it well. That movement came out years later, and so it has been incorporated. And we do, we say things sometimes, and we look back at them and say, "Oh my goodness, how could I talk about that then?" But you do the best you can do. It's all I knew at the time, and so this is so many years later, and the focus is really so different.
Yeah. So the bottom line is that intuitive eating, 1995, it was like the original, right, like this answer for this is what you can do instead of dieting. So it was never a diet. It was never to be used to promise weight loss. It was more about learning how to connect to your body and learning a way of making choices without rules.
Without rules. And then it's very interesting how it's been the concept of intuitive eating has been misinterpreted, and there really is an even more extensive definition of what intuitive eating is than what I just said, and I want to share that with you. I don't know if you know about this, but a number of years ago, there was a lecture at a conference where the speaker, attempted to debunk intuitive eating I won't go into all the details, but by saying that the dictionary definition of intuition is instinct, and that eating cannot be done just by instinct. And that's true. We're not just going by instinct. And so right before the third edition of Intuitive Eating came out, I started looking at it a lot differently in terms of explaining it to people. And we went into the different levels of brain functioning and looked at the fact that many, many billions of years ago, when there were dinosaurs, was it billions, millions, dinosaurs, they had a very low level of brain functioning, and it was simply for their survival. It was for self-preservation, and that was instinct. There was just an instinct to eat, and they went for it, but they didn't have any ability to have any feelings about it, like, oh, I'm so scared to eat, I don't think I will, or any thoughts about it. There was no, is gluten a good thing or not? That kind of thing. It was just simply instinct. And as animals evolved into mammals, another layer of brain functioning developed, and that's called the limbic brain. The first one's called the reptilian brain, which is appropriate for dinosaurs. And the limbic brain the mammalian brain is the seat of emotions and social behaviors. And so that added another layer of information that affected eating, because if you have pets, cats and dogs, they can be very depressed. One of them dies and the other one won't eat. There are emotions that can impact their instincts, but they can't talk about it. They can just feel bad, but they can't talk about it. And then we evolved into humans, and the difference between humans and lower level animals is that we have the neocortex, or the cognitive brain, the ability to have rational thought. So intuitive eating really takes in all three parts of the brain. And we look at it as a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. So, let's say you're upset, you're filled with anxiety, your hunger's gone. Well, does that mean you don't eat? No, it means that you take the rational part of your brain to look at the fact that you don't have an appetite, and not say, well, I'm not hungry, I won't eat, but to say, oh, my body actually needs food even though I don't have an appetite. And there's so many misconceptions. People say, well, I'm not hungry, so I'm just not going to eat, so leave me alone. And it's like, whoa, let's look at why you're not hungry. Do you have a cold and your taste buds aren't functioning well and food doesn't taste good? Or is there an emotion that's taking you away from it, or actually causing you to eat more than your hunger? So really, it's so important to look at the nuances of intuitive eating and not just say it's just an instinct. We just know to eat. For babies, typically it is an instinct because they haven't, gone far beyond that early on.
Yeah.
So
I really love that too. I love the whole idea of that there's kind of like, there is a flexible art as well, because I've also heard and read where, dietitians are embracing intuitive eating, which on the whole, I fully support. I think that should be in every class. That should be a whole course. I'm shocked it's actually not. But then you'll hear something, eat only when you're hungry. It's like, well, now you're turning it into a rule again, because that's just not today's humans, right? We're emotional creatures. And, there are absolutely times where we will eat to soothe, and we can do it in ways where we are actually really enjoying a soothing process, or we're really, getting through this emotion with food in a way that actually does not feel bad until you come in with your role saying you're only allowed to eat when you're feeling a certain level of hunger.
Well, it's so interesting what you're saying, because for me, the driving force of intuitive eating is satisfaction and getting pleasure in eating. Well, that's a feeling. So to say we can only eat for physical reasons, that's really very black and white thinking, and it doesn't take into consideration the fact that, as you just said, you can be needing soothing and be hungry and eat something that's a soothing food from your childhood. You might decide to have macaroni and cheese or something that really makes you feel good. And what's wrong with that? I'm right with you, Rebecca.
Nothing as far as I'm concerned, but
right.
Okay. Well, let's get into more the family dynamic. So, what do you think is most important for any parent to really understand? No matter where they're at with embracing intuitive eating, and they've got kids, what should they understand about how intuitive eating fits with families and how it's taught? And it might not be in line with what the rest of culture is doing. So I imagine it's going to be challenging too.
It is. And it's helping families understand the psychology behind it and understand that the more that they try to put pressure on their children to eat in a healthy way or eat in a way that's going to affect their weight, both of those are problematic. What they're actually doing is taking away the volition of the child. They're telling the child what to do. And it's not teaching the child that the child has wisdom. It's not saying, I know you know when you're hungry. I know you know when you're full. I know you know what food you like to eat. And this needs to be your job. And so they'll say, well, how can I let my kids just eat cookies all day long? And, it's best if I'm working with people when they have little tiny children, when they're toddlers, and help them understand how to present children with a variety of different foods and not make a big deal out of the play food, which is how I don't call it junk food. This little girl yesterday called it trash food. So it's not trash. I said it's not trash. But if they're that young, helping them, set it up so the children have no problems, like my clients have done who have gone through this process. But if they're older, helping them take a look at the fact that their job as parents is to have food available, to have it presented, to have the family eat together, to have food in the refrigerator that kids like, and if they're hungry, they can go get. And that's it. And then to sit down and allow the children to make the decisions for themselves, because the wisdom is there. And what it does by putting the responsibility into the child doesn't end up eating in a reactive way. And even before teenage years, if you think about it, even 2-year-olds are trying to assert their autonomy. What's their favorite word? It's no. And this is part of a healthy development. Eric Erickson talked about the 8 stages of man, which I now say would be 8 stages of human, all the developmental stages that we need to go through to become healthy adults. And the second one, the first one is trust, which is very interesting because that comes with learning that their signals are trustworthy because the caregiver is feeding them when they give the signal. Well, once that's established, the developmental stage is that of autonomy. And that comes back really big time in adolescence. But anywhere in between, the more you try to force your child to eat or not to eat, to push certain foods on a child or make sure that the child's eating enough or tell the child that he or she's eating too much, you're going to get a pushback from that and a reaction. So that's reactive eating with the purpose of, I'm my own person and I just want to do what I want to do and leave me alone. And so I think what's most important for families is to learn how to let go. Do the work of being parents and, as I said, in providing the food, and then let go. And I know it's very scary for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, being registered dietitian and a mom, so it's and my kids are 5 and 3. And so they love things like Nutella pancakes in the morning. And, then the sort of dietitian to me is like, oh, should they do it every day? And it's like, you can try, right, to say, okay, well, we're not having that on the menu today. And, the thing of it is that they'll eat eggs and they'll eat other things, but it's like, for them to be able to have this preference of this is what I like the most and this is what I enjoy the most, and not for your decision to be guided by like, oh, okay, I can only give this to them once a week. I can only spread the tiniest layer of, I got to find the healthiest version of Nutella or whatever. It's like, that's one meal and it's about the overall pattern. And I rarely give my kids veggie options at breakfast. It just doesn't compute with what we do. But like, I will put fruit out there, and some days they're asking for more fruit and other days they don't even touch it. And just like you said, this trust of like, they've got to feel this freedom and autonomy, and you will see periods of them without any pushing at all, reaching for, those quote unquote nutritious foods that you want them to build a taste for into adulthood. And that just knowing that food fight, the restriction part or the part of I push this, that it's not going to lead to a positive relationship with food, and our bodies, because kids are smart and they're going to start to pick up on and wonder, why is this being pushed in this intense way? Like, they're going to get that read if that's where you're coming from.
So a couple things about the Nutella pancakes. I'm sure if you made them every day for months, they might get sick of them.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe. And if they didn't get sick of them, the one other piece I want to make is maybe some mornings you don't have time to make pancakes.
Yeah. That's true.
And so you can't really be, a prisoner of that. But not to have some agenda behind it, other than, sure, you want them, that's great. And what's wrong with Nutella pancakes anyway? Yeah. It sounds like it's got a lot of balance in it,
Yeah, and just it's like it makes sense. They're good, and to see that whole picture of like, it's a good thing as a parent to see your child learning what they like, and to see them, learning to explore different foods, or even like there'll be a phase of, I like this fruit or vegetable and now I don't, something else will come around the corner. Like, there's not like a rule sheet for this is everything that a 2-year-old will like, and this is everything that a 10-year-old will like. It's being, you're doing your job, just introducing them and making foods available.
Right. And this little girl yesterday was saying she didn't like any vegetables. And I said, well, okay. She said, but I love fruit. And I said, well, there's a lot of the same, same thing, nutrients in both of those. And then I said, sometimes when you try something when you're very little and you don't like it and you never try it again, you don't know. You might end up liking it later. And she said, yeah, I'd like to try some new foods. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like veggies aren't, I would say I got more into veggies as an adult, and more when I got more into cooking too. And it's like, hey, it's great if you introduce them and they love them. But like, I would say both of my girls have different preferences for what they like and don't like. And between fruits and veggies, I mean, they like fruit more. Doesn't have to do with our tongues anyway? Like, they have more of an affinity for sweet.
I think it has to do with hormones in the brain. I have lots of clients who say they don't care about sweets at all. They want salty, crunchy, fatty.
Oh, interesting.
There's a hormone called ghrelin, which I learned about many years ago, that drives people to higher fat foods, and they like more of the the chips, and versus they don't care about the sweets. And some people just love the sweets. Well, another thought I had as you were talking, Rebecca, is that I think it's so important for the family to eat together as often as possible. It's a crazy world. You can't always do it, but kids learn by watching. So if the older people in the family are eating a wide variety of foods without pushing them on the child, eventually the child really wants to try it too. So I think so many people disregard that part of it. I mean, what are you eating as parents? Are you modeling? I mean, if you like vegetables, put them there for yourself. But if you don't like them, like not for breakfast, I don't eat vegetables in the morning either. The closest I come is avocado, and it's not really a vegetable. It's a fruit.
Technically, It's a fruit.
Yeah, it's a fruit.
I'll take botanical fruits for 100. So I want to get into the puberty, right? Because
so important.
I know. Well, and we know that's a time where bodies are meant to change, right? And there's a stage even before puberty where kids may grow in size, but not necessarily height, or they may be growing on their genetic path anyway and turning into a larger body. But parents freak out or doctors freak out and they think they want to put them on a diet or, no more sweets. And so like help families understand like what's happening around puberty and the body and to calm down.
There was a statistic that I have heard that the majority of little girls have to gain around 24 pounds over a period of time in order to get their first period. And this is the period of time when all of this trouble starts happening, as you said. It's a precursor to eating disorders because I do blame a lot of the pediatricians for this, for saying to the parent, oh, she's gained this many pounds this year, you better watch it. And then, parents believe their doctors, and doctors, of course, have maybe one course in nutrition in graduate school, and they end up starting to restrict the kids. So no, you can't, as you just said, you can't have this, or you shouldn't have as much of this. When in fact, for little girls and little boys, it's a similar thing. They're just not getting a period to show the beginning of puberty. Right. They need that fat in their bodies to make the hormones so that they can become,
mature adults.
Mature, eventually, exactly. So I'm educating people all the time about that piece of it, and it really calms down a lot of parents when they hear, oh, this is a normal thing. At the same time, helping them be aware of are there any red flags there? Is a child eating well beyond hunger needs? And could that be something for you to look at in terms of, is there an emotional issue going on that needs to be addressed? So, but so often they say, oh no, my kids, they just eat normally, and look, she's gained so much weight, for the little girls or the little boys, same thing. And it's like, calm down. It's going to be fine. If you just stand back, calm down.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, you'll look to see what problems might exist, but an individual's body is not a problem. It's never a problem. And I have heard client stories, I'm sure you have too, where they've been shamed by the pediatrician. And even like when their child is young, so like a client is in a larger body, where like the pediatrician might be thinking like, well, you isn't necessarily schooled on weight stigma or health at every size, and just like making judgments about what that family does. And then kind of, oh, well, if I can scare them into health and wellness. And it's like a family may have, completely reasonable, flexible, balanced eating habits, but happen to be not, the thin ideal. And you get even more warnings from the doctor based on what the parents look like, or.
Well, there's a lot of judgment out there, and it's really unfair. I had a woman come in many years ago talking to me about her 8-year-old daughter, whom she said was as active as could be, and she knew everything that the child ate because she made her meals, and this child was a larger child, and there was a lot of judgment about that. She says, what can I do? And I said, help her love herself, help her. This is what her body is meant to be. She said, oh yeah, well, one side of the family, my husband's side of the family, there are people who are larger. So we can't presume that people who live in larger bodies are eating any differently necessarily than people who live in smaller bodies. It's a cruelty that is happening in our world today, all that judgment.
Well, and it's likely to contribute to worse health, whether it's avoiding to see the doctor in the first place to even know the labs, or just avoiding to want to engage in self-care behaviors because you've been shamed and that you're not worthy, or, like until you weigh less or unless you try these things, like society is going to make a judgment on you. So it ends up being a lot of work in self-compassion and self-acceptance first, right? So we can help an individual or a family take good care of themselves.
Yeah. And in speaking up, most people don't know that they can refuse to be weighed at the doctor's office. And there are so many people that miss some, the beginnings of certain diseases that could have been treated, but they never went to the doctor because they were so afraid of the judgment, of the doctor.
And so what would you tell a client who they were going, so you encourage them to refuse to be weighed? Would you give them a script? Would you just tell them, just say no, or what?
Well, tell them what I say. Although my doctor, whom I've been going to for close to 40 years, I've taught him. So he doesn't do anything. But my gynecologist, they always want to weigh me. And I say, no, I don't need to. I'm not pregnant. I do not need to be weighed. And they'll look at me it's not the doctor so much as it is the nurse.
The nurses,
So I did have one issue at my own doctor's office because he doesn't weigh me, but the person said for the medical records, for the medical electronic, the electronic medical records, they need to put a weight in. I said, fine, just put in whatever you want, or I threw out the number. It doesn't have to be, they do not have to go on the scale. And so I have done some practicing with clients about how will you say this.
Yeah.
And some of them are shocked because they really believe they have to do what the doctor says.
Yeah. Well, and then kind of like going back to the idea of you have your kid at a pediatrician appointment and, make sure that you talk about if it's pre-puberty, like what the Tanner score is, or even, parent might not even know about that, but that's basically kind of guessing how close to puberty you are, because it may be, before changes, when a natural period of weight gain, that's something you can, make sure you talk to the doctor about to just kind of help frame up perspective. But then even if it's post-puberty or, there's not a sort of an outright explanation, that the answer is not going to be take away food. The answer is not going to be exercise till you die. The answer is not going to be to put on some kind of crazy diet or even paleo or Whole30. But I've seen that. I've seen that in DC. Clients come bringing in, my doctor said I should lose some weight and do Whole30. And they're like, going through puberty, and it's shameful.
I think what's really important, and this is how I educate families, to call the doctor before you bring the child in.
Ooh. And
to say, it's very important to me that you do not talk about the child's weight in front of the child. I mean, I guess when they're little, they have to get height and weight. And if they do it in a just kind of matter-of-fact way and don't say anything about it, it's not going to do the damage, I think, because they want to keep the growth charts going. But do not speak about my child's weight. And people have done that, and it's respected if they will call the doctor in advance.
Okay, that's another good tip. So even though like you in all your work and with intuitive eating, you would think that people would get that it's not about weight loss. Do you still get people coming saying like, I hope to lose weight through this, or I want to lose weight, or I've been told I need to lose weight? And what do you do?
Well, first of all, you use the word compassion, which is such a huge piece of all of this work. In fact, when I start any of my sessions, especially with people with eating disorders, I ask them if they're willing to have compassion for themselves and, however their eating disorder began. I'm a certified eating disorder RD, so I do a lot of eating disorder work as well. So that's frequently what people come in and say. And I will say to them, I have extreme compassion for you if you're feeling physically uncomfortable in your body. And this is especially with people who are living in larger bodies, who have had eating disorders, who they don't have the thin privilege that so many people do. And I say, I have compassion for you. And I need to say to you that if you put any focus on your weight, it's going to sabotage the process of you being able to tune into the wisdom inside of your body. So I hear you, I understand you, and not but, and, because I think it's always important to say and not but, and we need to put the focus on your behaviors, on on your self-care, on your self-respect, how you talk to yourself, how you, what you do for yourself in a kind way. And they may talk about it every week, when I hate my body and I hear that you're uncomfortable in your body. Let's see how we can change that language. And, but I come from a place of compassion rather than coming from a place of, oh, come on, you just can't. I would never say this, of course, but we're just not going to worry about weight. It's not a good idea. Here's this health at every size movement. You can't throw that at people because then they feel judged by you. Actually. They feel judged about wanting to lose weight. And so you're not colluding with them about the weight loss. What you're doing is having compassion for the discomfort that they're in emotionally and physically, and then helping them connect intuitively, and which makes them feel great. And so they'll come in and have had several experiences during the week where they tuned into hunger or fullness or had such a satisfying meal, and it pulls them away from the weight piece of it.
I agree 100% that it is so, so important to meet a person where they are and to open up space where there is not judgment, especially coming from the person there to help them, the person in service of their well-being, because they're doing plenty of judging on their own, right. And if nothing else, to validate, of course, that this makes sense. And if anything, to help educate them about diet culture. All the signs in society say that this should be your goal. So there is this sense of, and this actually makes sense, but let's also understand why setting body weight goals and putting all your hopes in the basket of I need to make my body smaller is not likely to get you what you're really seeking, that freedom that you're really seeking.
Things have gotten really twisted because we are embracing health at every size, because we all understand this as professionals. What's happening is we're giving that agenda to the client too soon and trying to talk them, giving them all the statistics about why diets don't work and the idea that, you think your life is going to be perfect if you lose weight. You start addressing that early on, and actually it's combative. And I really think that the starting with compassion allows you over time to help the client understand the problems with dieting and the problems with focusing on waiting to live their lives until they've lost weight, and the things that they come in with. I'm very much about motivational interviewing and helping the client understand things at a point when they're ready to make the changes, when they're ready to make changes. And yes, eventually you want to help them get away from any thoughts about losing weight, that would not be the focus, but it's going to backfire if you do it the first session. People are going to feel misunderstood. So it's important, I think, to take this into consideration.
Absolutely, especially if you are really, truly, if the goal really is truly to help people, it's about that connection of meeting them with where they're at, and as a helping professional, as long you're not giving them that, you're not saying your body is a problem and here's the weight loss plan, but it also might not be the most helpful thing to start out with overwhelming with too much information. Especially if a person is dealing with ambivalence, like on the one hand, I really can't stomach the idea of another diet, but gosh, on the other hand, like in the teen years, I'd really want to make sure I get a date to prom, or I really want, and these are the pressures and things that come up that message after message says, this is what's valued. And absolutely, I think that everybody has a role in fighting that system on the whole. But when it comes to doing work with individuals, having that connection of this is where they're at, and to trust yourself that you can gently introduce the right words at the right times that truly then become helpful to the person as they're ready to hear it and ready to do more.
And we're going on a path with our clients. I mean, we're a team together, the two of us. I'm not sitting in that authoritarian role telling a person what she should or shouldn't do, including stop feeling bad about your weight.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
It's really not really understanding of where you say, where the client is.
Yeah.
So
I call that, which actually isn't mine. I got it from acceptance commitment therapy, but in body kindness, I talk about a dead person's goal. And it's a goal that a dead person can do better than you. It's like, I'll never eat chocolate cake, or, I never want to feel bad about my body again.
Right.
Like that's a bad goal because only dead people can do those goals. Like you have to think of the action you want to take. And when you can't control your feelings, it's not, what actions would you make like if you felt better in your body, and then plan those as the things that you want to approach, as opposed to avoid this and that. I definitely think that's really important for people. So as we wrap up our chat today, I really think, this focus of intuitive eating in the family. So if I could kind of sum us up with where we've been so far, is that the parents need to be where they're going to be. And people may be in different places, but absolutely, as being responsible for the family unit, there are ways that you can bring the quote structure of intuitive eating that is actually flexible and promotes body autonomy and trust. You can bring this into the household, and it might be easier if your, kids are born in that genetically set point range of society isn't going to give you a problem. But in that family, right, we didn't hit on this, but what I encourage clients is, in that family, you can still teach kids to respect their own bodies and to respect other people's bodies. So you can still teach all bodies are good bodies. I mean, all kids should be learning that. And that a really healthy relationship with food, we talked about, isn't based on rules and good and bad. And we talked about the curiosity that you could encourage among your kids as they're growing, and they're going to have days where they eat and you feel relief, like, okay, they'll be healthy eaters, but days when they don't, and that look for the patterns, keep giving them opportunities. And that if you have kids' bodies are going to change during puberty, if you have challenges at the doctor's office, set healthy boundaries that truly protect your kids' right to take up space.
Well, and I think you just said something so important, the word protect. It's the job of parents to protect our children and nurture our children and protect them against any kind of abuse. And it's very abusive, what they hear sometimes in the doctor's office, very abusive, and can lead right on to an eating disorder. There is one statistic that kids who diet, I think they have an 8 times greater risk of having an eating disorder by the time they're 15. So if you restrict those kids, and little ones are usually not finding their own diets, it's usually they're getting it from their parents. Yeah,
no, that's a really good point. I mean, dieting was something I did with my mom, just kind of like, following her lead. Sometimes she didn't know I was kind of joining in with her. And we've talked about it. We've kind of come full circle around all of that. It's not to be shamey to the listeners who are parents or aunts and uncles, if your life touches children, you have the power to be an influencer here. And it's important to do your own type of work, so that you can be helpful to others you care about.
Absolutely. And if parents are not willing to do their own work for themselves, and I've had this happen, they're not ready to get off of diet mentality, but they're willing to not talk about it, to not show it, and to bring up their children in an intuitive eating way. It's interesting. You would think it can't be done, but for people who are not quite ready to make the change for themselves, they're open to not putting it on their children.
Yeah. Well, I love that as a sort of alternative, right? I guess it's just like, I know I've got my own stuff I'm working on, but I also hear you that this is the best way to help my kids have a healthy mind and body. So I will embrace the practice for their benefit. And I've got to imagine that that's got to be hell on earth for the parent who isn't quite ready for it. But at least we are trying to prevent future eating disorders, future damage, future trauma that could be associated with your child's life.
Yes. So, I mean, we can't, I think a lot of what we're talking about, Rebecca, is it's not black and white. It's a lot of it is nuanced, and it's finding a way to the goal that we have for helping, children grow up to be healthy in mind, body, and soul, and be accepting of all bodies. And it can't be black and white that it's going to happen in any family just by you telling the parents that they're doing the wrong thing.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And even if the family does, I've had lots of families who are like, we eat out a lot. We buy soda and chips all the time, and it's a free-for-all. I've dealt with that where they kind of, on the one hand, they do want to make changes, and, that's important to them, and that doesn't mean dieting. And that, like you said, perfectly, it's not black and white. It's knowing what you're doing, though. You should not be eliminating sugar or following a plan that says foods are individually good and bad.
So it's a little more complicated than, a diet is so basically simple. Eat this, eat that, eat this amount of it, eat it at this time. And intuitive eating is much more complex because we're complex.
Yes.
Humans are complex.
Yes.
So. Yes.
Well, this has been such a great conversation today. I'm so excited to, help people think more positively about their role as parents and, in this sort of overwhelming and scary diet culture that we're in. And I thank you for your time. Where can listeners go to connect more with you and learn more about your great work?
Well, I have a website, ElyseResch.com. It's ELYSERESCH.com. I have all kinds of things on there, including my words of wisdom for all the many years that I've been around this planet, thank goodness, and some talks I've given and some papers I've written and an explanation of intuitive eating. I think it's all there. And then there's the intuitive eating website, which has so many of the studies. We have over 70, I think close to 80 studies now validating intuitive eating as it's evidence-based, scientifically evidence-based process. So that website, you can read some of these studies that will give you, the confidence to know that this is the way to go. And then my email address is ElyseResch@gmail.com. So if anyone would like to write to me.
Oh, you're about to get a bunch of emails.
Well, I'm going on vacation in a couple of weeks, so and I'm not going to be in touch with email. I'm going to come back to 1,000 emails.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'll include your information in the show notes as well. And it was so wonderful to talk to you today.
You too, Rebecca. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. I would love if you could take a minute and leave a rating and review on iTunes. I know they don't make it very easy, so I have a few quick tips for you. First, launch the Apple Podcast app, and then you're going to click the search button to enter the name Body Kindness, and you'll find my podcast. You'll see the album art. And when you click on the album art, there is going to be a button in the middle at the top. It's called Reviews. Click that. And then when you scroll to the bottom, you will see an option to leave a review. And so you'll click that button and go ahead and write your thoughts. I also would love ideas for future episodes. You can email me, Rebecca@bodykindnessbook.com. Again, that's Rebecca@bodykindnessbook.com. I love chatting about the show and how it's helpful. And so keep those emails coming. And also, if you're not yet completed with the e-course, don't forget that's a free resource for anyone who's interested in practicing body kindness. If you visit bodykindnessbook.com and click on Get Started, just enter in your name and email and you'll get instant access. I'll see you there.